Gary, let's take a moment and say thank you to our sponsors at Fuji Sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've been working with us for a very long time, not only on this podcast, but also at the Academy. And I'm taking a peek at their website right now, and they have a brand new ultra light gi. Now, this is mind-blowing. I'm looking at my size. A2 is 2.75 pounds. I mean, that's under 3 pounds. That's mind-blowing.
I could even lift that. And go to their website, fujisports.com. Check it out. Anything you could need for your jiu-jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Hey, it's been a while since we started RŌL TV project.
It's been a while since you started it. I did come in later, and I can't say enough about it, especially the new platform. It's really amazing, fully customizable, and you know a little bit more about the structure.
Well, so two things you need to know. One is the subscription service, which is $9 a month. You can get access to hundreds of videos, hundreds of drills, techniques, and so on in a very nice library categorized as you need them. But two, different lessons. You can actually purchase those individually and you own them. So the subscription is not tied to it at all. You can look at things like spider guard, half guard sweeps, half guard chokes, folding pass, and so on. There's so many of them out there. So take a look and see where you need help with the videos, right? 30%. If you type in RŌL Radio as a code.
Who doesn't like saving money? Go to RŌLAcademy.tv. The Tap Cancer Out Charity Tournament Series is back and heading to 9 more cities across the U.S. this fall, with stops in Austin, Chicago, Jacksonville, Philadelphia, Boston, and more. Tap Cancer Out is aiming to donate another $1.2 million to its 10 beneficiary organizations. Funding and registration are now open for all cities and dates. So head to www.tapcancerout.org/tournaments to find your city and sign up. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please remember to hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. On this episode, we have one of Roy Dean's original students, Rick Ellis. Today, Rick shares his journey from his start in jiu-jitsu, what it was like to train with Roy, what it was like to prepare for his grueling black belt demonstration, why he believes people seek jiu-jitsu out, and more. Here's the RŌL Radio with life coach, entrepreneur, musician, and BJJ Black Belt under Roy Dean, Rick Ellis.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we're live. Gary, how are you? Why are you drooling?
Why am I drooling?
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
How is it? Why you are more excited than typically?
I've been following our guest for a little while. Yeah. So when COVID hit and everybody was shut down, and we had our little meetings where we would watch videos together and stuff over Zoom. Somebody sent me a link to something that our guest had just put out, or it had been out for a little while, but it really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. And then
what was so eye opening about it? Before we even get into the guest, I'm curious. What was the impact point?
That I'm old, and that there's a place for me.
That's
and the rest of us are older gentlemen who maybe started a little later in life.
Yeah,
so that was the impact.
Let's dig into this.
Yeah, let's go.
Rick Ellis in the house. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you were able to make a little bit of time for us and have this amazing conversation. Before we even begin this big thing, we know that you came across one of my students, Dan, this weekend, and during the fabulous seminar of Roy Dean. How was that? How was the event?
Oh, it was great. First of all, it's great to be here, guys. This is so much fun. I always enjoy going on podcasts, so I appreciate you guys inviting me today. So we were in Wisconsin this weekend. Yeah. Roy taught a seminar out there, and one of his affiliates, who's a good friend of mine, Chris Makuta, earned his black belt. He did a crucible this weekend. So that was the main reason I wanted to head out there, was to support my brother and, help him earn his black belt. So that was a whole lot of fun for me. And yeah, I met Dan, and it's a small world. What's funny is Jiu-Jitsu is huge. It's worldwide, but it really is kind of a niche subculture. And whenever you go out somewhere, people recognize you, and it's a very small community, even though it seems very, very big.
Yeah, it's one of those mind-blowing things in my mind. And Gary and I, we've talked about this quite a bit of times on the show, is no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, and somebody will notice your T-shirt or the way how you behave, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're doing jiu-jitsu. And then conversation starts. And I even shared many stories from the airports and just random places, coffee shops, people talking to me, and just the instant connection that takes place between two different individuals with a common denominator, which would be jiu-jitsu. Have you ever found yourself in those spots, meeting complete random strangers and somewhere?
Yeah, you know what's funny? I went to Mendocino, California last year to Grapplers Retreat. And it's out on the coast in Northern California. On the way back, I stopped at a gas station somewhere on the outskirts of Sacramento in some little town in the middle of nowhere. And I'm walking around, and I could tell the guy at the counter was just looking at me. And this was kind of during the COVID times. I didn't have my mask on. And I thought, oh, he's going to give me an earful about not having a mask. And I get to the counter, and he goes, do you do YouTube videos? So yeah, it's just funny. And, I always say the same thing, that I'm an introvert by nature, and I'm not entirely comfortable being the protagonist of my own reality show. So it's always a little strange to meet people. But yeah, it seems like everywhere I go, everywhere I train, there's always someone that I connect with.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing.
I do think so too. It's just amazing in my mind how all this can so easy to connect. I don't know many other activities that would have the same similar dynamic with this instant connection between students, between peers, between just individuals, not knowing each other, but yet gravitating towards each other in such a amazing way. Why do you think that happens? What do you think is the main reasoning that we are
shared struggle?
Shared struggle. In normal interactions, you meet someone, there's social protocol. Hey, let's go have a bite to eat. Let's whatever. There's a process to bonding with somebody. But when you bump fists with someone and you share that intense physical experience, it just shortcuts the process, and you're instantly friends. And so I really think there's something very, very powerful about jiu-jitsu in that regard. And it also breaks down cultural barriers. You could have a brain surgeon interfacing with someone who's works as an electrician. Normally they wouldn't run in the same circles, but here they are becoming best friends through that shared struggle. It is like the mat is the equalizer between different groups of individuals, whether you look at it from poor, rich, different colors, different corners of the world, and different professions, where we come from, who we are, what we do. Everything kind of disappears on the mat. We all here to choke each other.
Did you
Absolutely.
For people that don't know, you were a musician for quite a while as well. Did you find that same, it's a different bond, obviously, but I think whenever you have those shared interests, it breaks down a lot of barriers. You just said you were an introvert, and I can't imagine getting up on stage, right, to sing or play guitar as an introvert. And that was before you started your jiu-jitsu, right? At all. So how did it?
Yeah, I was a musician. As a kid, I was a musician. That was really my passion. I think, any interest where there's a group of people that do that thing, it becomes sort of tribal, kind of a tribal bonding mechanism. And people seek that out. My father, who was, a guy from the 1970s with the comb over and, lifelong drinker, smoker, he went to the bar in the afternoon every day of his life to hang out with his tribe. And so I think, a lot of guys are looking for that tribal sort of connection, and it can be anything. It can be CrossFit. It can be something physical. It can be a shared interest like chess or anything else. But yeah, I think we're naturally inclined to those kinds of connections as human beings, for sure.
Do you think that's why it's so difficult to join jiu-jitsu, because we are seeking that approval from the tribe, being accepted as part of that group?
That's probably one reason. It's always intimidating to go into a new tribe. In the past, when humans were fully tribal, going into a tribe could mean death, could mean a lot of things. So I think we're sort of wired to be a little scared to go into those interactions. But, in jiu-jitsu, there's also the fact that you're having to, put your skill against your opponent's skill in a very real kind of visceral way. So I think it can just be intimidating on a lot of levels for new people.
What would be one of the things that you feel that people are the most intimidated by?
Well, I think it's jiu-jitsu requires you to crush your ego at every stage of the journey. I still have my ego smashed. You walk into a room, you have to perform. You don't always perform at your best, and you have to accept that the result is the result. Whereas in the real world, we can build up this false kind of ego that's not commensurate with our performance. It's just, I'm this and that. Because we're just not tested that much in the real world. And so I think someone walking into a jiu-jitsu academy is confronted very, very quickly with the fact that they're going to be bad at this. And a lot of people, that their ego can't handle it. It's very hard to let go of that. We've all seen those guys that they're just, they put everything into trying to be successful. And it's the letting go of all that where the growth happens. And I think that's one of the things, that kind of emotional, psychological willingness to just suck and acknowledge that you suck and that you're here and you're going to get better, but your place in the pecking order is real low when you come in.
Yeah. But don't you think that's kind of counterintuitive to the situation that we are engaging in? I'm coming into a brand new to an academy. I'm a brand new student. I've never done this before. I want to learn this cool thing that everybody else is talking about. But yet we have this ego around us that I'm not the worst one. I can't be the worst one. I can't be the one who sucks the most. I mean, why in the world does that happen? Because one would think, I want to learn, so I have to be open-minded enough to accept the fact that I am not the best.
Well, I think it's that test, right? You're immediately tested in front of others. So if you're 40 and or 20 and you want to learn how to play guitar, you can do that in your bedroom. And you can suck by yourself for a really long time before you put something out in front of somebody else. And at that point, you're still probably scared, nervous, intimidated. But when you walk into jiu-jitsu...
Well, and also, if you look at how society is today, everyone tries to shield their kids from failure, from discomfort. People get a participation trophy. It seems like at every turn... people are trying to build up their self-esteem, and there's just not a lot of failure out there. And when you're confronted with something like jiu-jitsu, which is really nothing but failure for a long time, it's such a stark contrast to everything you've experienced in the real world that I think it can be pretty shocking for people.
And yet, jiu-jitsu is maybe not the fastest growing, but one of the fastest growing activities that we've experienced the last decade or so, or maybe last 2 decades. So give me your thoughts. Why does that happen?
I think the flip side of that is that people want to do something where there is kind of a rite of passage, do something that's difficult, something where there's, we don't have a lot of rites of passage in our world. You don't go on a vision quest at 13 to discover your name in the desert, or those sorts of things that people in the past maybe did. So I think there's a longing to belong, a longing to be part of a tribe, a longing to be part of something bigger than you. And the flip side, obviously, is what we just talked about, that kind of ego protection, which is, pretty present.
And I do think that deep inside, we actually can do hard things. We are designed to go through struggles, and we are designed to troubleshoot. We are designed to overcome the obstacles that are ahead of us. Just this, current times, I guess, puts us in this predicament in a way where we are trying to protect ourselves, yet we have these obstacles ahead of us. And I think that's one of them. Personally, I think that's one of the main reasons why jiu-jitsu is so appealing. It's so difficult to start, but once we get a taste of it, we get very quickly sucked into that vortex of jiu-jitsu. It's hard to even stop doing it. Like, I have few students, like even the last night, I was like talking to this gentleman. He's in his mid 40s, maybe 50s, and he's like, I can't stop doing this. I can't stop. I gotta come back tomorrow. I gotta come back tomorrow. This is just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people quit jiu-jitsu and you don't always know why. And I think it's a combination of reasons, but the ones that stick with it, they get it. It gets into your soul in a way. I mean, it's so powerful. Just going to RŌL, I consider it meditation, because you have to disconnect your mind. You can't be thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, or that problem at work, or the fact that your girlfriend is mad at you. I mean, you can't think about anything other than the immediate problem you're facing with that opponent. And so I find it to be a way to just interrupt all of the thought patterns, interrupt everything. It's meditation, a dynamic meditation. And, also that neurological reset. There's something very visceral and powerful about sparring that you can't get just by going to the gym and lifting weights in a very linear way. And so I think it gives you a neurological reset. I think it gives you a mental reset, because you can forget about everything. And, the self-defense is great, but honestly, I think it's one of the secondary reasons of all. It's the connecting of the tribe. Mm-hmm. It's the bonding of the people. It's the challenges. It's the ego destruction. It's all of those things I think are far more important and powerful reasons why jiu-jitsu is good.
Yeah, I think the self-defense is that's the spark. That might be the motivation for people to come through the door. But then
But honestly, by the time you get your blue belt, you're probably good enough to handle yourself.
Yeah. I'm saying,
it's so, and it's like Roy Dean always says, the challenges in competition for sure. But at the higher levels of jiu-jitsu, the challenges you face against an opponent simply don't exist in the real world. Mm-hmm. Someone's not going to do De La Hiva or an inverted attack, or none of this thing exists in the real world. So at some point, you're not really training for quote unquote self-defense. Right. You're training to be better at this game we play that becomes very, very intricate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that the self-defense need, kind of what you said, disappears around blue belt. I mean, anybody who achieves a blue belt level can most definitely, I would hope at least they can protect themselves, right? I wanted to ask you something. Oh, I know what it was. You were talking about disconnecting and being a point of meditation, and I actually flipping it to the opposite side. If we are unable to create this disconnect from the reality, our performance sacrifices quite a bit. This is where we make mistakes. This is where we are unable to perform to the desired level. This is, many call it this, a bad day on the mat. And so it's interesting how these two realities, they coexist, yet they don't often bleed over each other. The reality on the mat and our day-to-day operational life.
It's a tricky calculus. Like John Danaher says, you are always somewhere between tension and relaxation. And if you're too relaxed, you're not effective. If you're too tense, you're not effective. You have to find that perfect place where you're relaxed enough to be open to the possibilities, to be able to let things go and go to the next thing. But you have to have enough tension to be effective. And it can be a tricky thing to fall into that zone.
Yeah.
And some people, the longer you train, the more you learn how to just relax into it and get yourself in that place. But even a little bit more tension than what you want, a little bit of adrenaline, and now you're not as effective. It's a very interesting thing. It
most definitely is. And everything changes from partner to partner. It definitely changes as we age and as we go through this journey, gaining more information. And then the evolution of jiu-jitsu as another component is completely out of our control, and everything changes. It's like almost hitting a moving target. But that's probably why we all still here. I don't know.
Is that balance something that you find so I've only been doing this for a few years. I'm not that far along. And my jiu-jitsu still at times is more of a reactionary jiu-jitsu. And so my balance, trying to find that balance and talking about tension and relaxation, is when do I become more assertive, not aggressive. People always misinterpret that, but more assertive in my jiu-jitsu. When do I decide I've got to be first, rather than, even playing your own game. You can play your own game and be relaxed, but there's that point where I find myself now where I don't know when to switch on to a quote unquote like higher gear and put it into the next gear. Does that make sense? And how do you find?
Yeah, I mean, that could be your personality. I mean, everyone's personality comes out on the mat. I'm pretty mellow by nature, and I tend to be, well, a counterpuncher. It would be if you're a striker, you'd be a counterpuncher. I'm a counterpuncher. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that I'm a little older, and most guys I spar with are younger, faster, fitter, stronger. And I know I'm going to be playing defense. And so I sort of accept that reality and just try to be very, very efficient at getting into my good defensive position so that I can then reverse the position and get on top. But yeah, some of it I think is just your nature. You know, some people are very aggressive by nature and they won't concede anything from day one.
Is that important characteristics for a jiu-jitsu player to have this adaptation of who I am and who I'm going with? Or should we try to overcome the realities and become better?
I think you should be able to switch strategies at will. Maybe not as a white belt, you don't have that skill set yet. As a blue belt, you're just developing that skill. Certainly by purple belt, you should be able to have an offensive mindset. I'm going to impose my will on you today. Or a defensive mindset. I'm just going to react to whatever you're doing and be able to play a softer style game. I mean, I think by purple belt, you should be able to play the various ways in which we play jiu-jitsu, even though one of those might be your preferred way just based on your nature.
How does one develop that skill?
I think you have to have, it starts with an environment where the instructor is leading by example. And if you're in an environment where it's very tough, it's very severe, nobody concedes anything, it's go, 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 leave it all on the mat, every roll is to the death, then you'll never be able to practice that style of jiu-jitsu where you're exploring different ways of playing it. So I think it starts with having an environment where you have training partners that are willing to let go of that ego as well. And, you know, I seek out people that I can do that with. Here where I'm training in California, there's some sharks in that room, and you know that those guys, they're just going to bring it 100%, and I have to bring myself to that level, otherwise I'm not in the game with them. But I know those guys that I can say, hey, let's just dial it back. I'm trying to practice my passing. Can you just play guard retention? Let's just play a little bit here and try to create maybe some mini challenges for yourself to let you explore those things.
But Rick, don't you think that that's one of the hardest things when it comes to jiu-jitsu? Letting go of that mindset of I have to win. I cannot be submitted.
I have to win.
And putting
it's
yourself,
hard.
It is. And you're putting yourself, because what you're talking about is putting intentionally, you're making an intelligent decision to put yourself in the most vulnerable position where you know likelihood of you failing is extremely high with the intent of you learning and getting better.
Yeah. I actually enjoy doing that. I enjoy being in extremely bad defensive positions. Back when I ran my school, all the time, I would tell whoever I'm sparring with, what's your best position? Let's start there. What's your best position? Let's start there. And it's fine. Mount me, start me there, because it's kind of fun to just see, you know, whether it's the Elio Gracie mindset where you're just trying to survive and become untappable. And I actually find that a lot of fun. I think once I got my black belt, that mindset became even a little more interesting to me than always trying to impose your will.
Yeah. I was about to ask, do you think that is a part of the development of jiu-jitsu, you know, an individual who practices jiu-jitsu? Because I find it fascinating to put myself intentionally in these vulnerable positions, not only to see what I would do, but I want to see what my partner is doing, like how his brain works mechanically. What is he seeing that I'm not seeing? And I'm looking at it from both sides, both perspectives. Do you think that is just evolution of our jiu-jitsu, that we just seeking the other side?
I mean, I think it's a mature perspective, understanding that it's two sides of the coin, defense and offense, and having the willingness to be vulnerable. You know, a lot of people, it goes back to the ego. They don't have that vulnerability. And so they can't concede anything. But eventually you let all that go and you realize that we're just playing a game here. I tap every time I train. Almost every time I train, I tap. And you just become okay with it. And you want to explore the things that are dangerous. Okay, I'm flat on my back and you're on me. How deep can this submission go? And is there still a solution for me, even at that extreme, place? And I find it fascinating, but not everybody can do that. I think there's a maturity there to try to do that.
We know not everybody can. There's a lot of
jokes
aside. There's a lot of hard-headed guys
Sometimes
out there. But listen,
people.
it's styles, it's personalities, and maturity. What you were mentioning, and I think all that creates an environment, and that environment will dictate how much we progress and which direction we are progressing to. So, that's always interesting for the students to find it. That's probably why we often talk about finding a correct academy, finding a correct environment that you want to train into with the purpose of you getting better.
Right. That's your tribe again, though, right?
Yeah. I would go back to that tribe.
Yeah.
And everyone's looking for something different. Some people are real intense and they just want a very, competition focused academy. And that's great. That's fine. I have no problem with those environments, but just understand that if you're a practitioner, you should probably try a few different academies in your area to see which one resonates the most with you, because we're all looking for slightly different things from this art.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Personalities make the tribe. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Let's pivot this a little bit. How did it all just start for you? When did do you remember your very first day on the mat?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, what started it for me was UFC 1. And like most of us who are a little bit older, we all saw Royce Gracie win, and it was very eye-opening. Of course, in 1993, there are not dojos on every corner, so I had to put aside my desire to learn this art for quite a while. And I was also busy. I was an audio engineer in LA, and I was, very, very busy in my career, and I didn't have a lot of time to train. So I ended up doing a little bit of Japanese jiu-jitsu for a few years to kind of fill the gap, I guess, and only because that dojo was very close to my house. But it wasn't until I had moved to Bend, Oregon, I started training at a Taekwondo facility. On Thursday nights, they let a bunch of us use their mats, and we're trying to all teach ourselves how to grapple at very, very low skill level there, people going pretty hard.
What year is this?
That was like 2006, I want to say. 2005, 2006, somewhere in there.
So how do you guys get the where do you guys get the information from if you self?
It was tough. In those days, it was tough. There was one guy who was a blue belt named Jimmy, who was like royalty. And he was the connection with Roy Dean. He was a friend of Roy's from San Diego. And he invited Roy to come up and teach a little seminar to our little group of grapplers. Roy was a brown belt at the time when he came up. But yeah, we were just trying to learn off of each other. There was a guy named Sean Jewell, who was an MMA coach who had done Sambo and Jiu-Jitsu and kickboxing. He was pretty good, actually. But I never saw him get on the mat. He had some back problems, but he would coach from the sidelines. We would all go ask him questions. There wasn't YouTube yet, so it was hard. It was hard to get knowledge.
I'm laughing and I'm smiling because that's literally brings all the memories. It's like, he's a blue belt. Whoa, yeah. He knows everything.
So how long was it after that seminar with Roy that you became his student and working with him more and more?
Well, I ended up hitting it off with Roy during that seminar. I asked him, hey, what do you do? He was working as an audio engineer in San Diego, and I had been an audio engineer in California. So we had that connecting point. We became friends, and he expressed that he was wanting to open a school somewhere. And Jimmy went to work on him, and I went to work on him, saying, hey, do it here in Oregon. So about 6 months later, he had gotten his black belt. And he moved to Oregon and opened his school, and me and Jimmy became his first students.
That's incredible.
Do you know what you are stepping into at that point of time? And what I mean by that, up to that point, you go through exploration points with a blue belt or somebody who is less experienced, but then you stumble upon Roy Dean, arguably one of the best instructors today, and you begin this new chapter, at that point of time, do you realize the magnitude of what's happening around you?
There was always a sense that he was an exceptional teacher. Even as a brown belt, when he taught that seminar, he was Roy Dean. He taught the way he teaches. He's evolved. He's much better these days, but he was always very special even in those days. So we all had a sense that he was building something that was unique. And also the way he ran classes, the way that the belt demonstrations were set up, was very, very different. So I think a lot of us sort of understood that. But it wasn't until I left his school, I left as a purple belt. And then for the next decade, I bounced around and trained at a lot of different places. It wasn't until I had left that I really realized how special that environment was.
Isn't it interesting how we appreciate the things that we have the moment we don't have them anymore, either by choice or not by choice? I mean, it's just such a reality of life. But I do remember, I don't remember how old I was, but I do remember watching those belt testing ceremonies that Roy Dean's been putting on YouTube. And I always found it so fascinating, the precision that things are executed and the way how he was narrating them. And, everything was done with such a finesse. It was almost like dance.
Yeah. Yeah, he is someone who has studied many martial arts.
Yeah.
He's got black belts in several martial arts. So his movement was always exceptional. In fact, Roy Harris, who's his teacher, Roy Dean's teacher, will tell you, he says, look, Roy Dean's movement, he didn't get from me. I taught him a lot, but I didn't really teach him the way to move the way he does. That's just something that he came with. And so that, precision of movement, that elegance of movement, and we all tried to model ourselves after that. It just was something that, we thought, oh, this is how you do techniques. And then also that belt testing process, to have to demonstrate what I think is important. And then to have to, have the live component where you're actually having to implement it against resistance. So I love that process of testing. He's gotten criticized a lot. A lot of people don't like that methodology. A lot of people think it's, silly or whatever. They just like the Brazilian way where you're just given a belt when you're ready. And that's fine. There's many ways to do this. But as someone that has had to prepare to do a demonstration like that, to get physically prepared, technically prepared, I'm a big fan of that process because I think it really helps accelerate your progress.
Yeah, and we had Roy Dean on the show a year ago, and he did talk in detail about he shared some details as far as the thought behind the testing process. But I'm curious to pick your brain on this a little bit. What was it? What was the feeling in your mind when you're approaching the day? Maybe that morning or maybe night before, you went through this entire training. You mentally preparing yourself for this test. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was quite lengthy too. It wasn't just 5 minutes. There was an effort that had to go into all of this. What's going through your mind as you get closer?
What's funny is my blue belt test was the very first blue belt demo that Roy did.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, no pressure on you at all.
Jimmy had gotten his purple belt, and I had watched Jimmy go through his belt demo, and that was the first belt demonstration that Roy put on YouTube, Jimmy Da Silva. And Jimmy's an amazing athlete, incredible. His movement's incredible, and it was a beautiful demonstration. And I had never seen something like this, and it was incredibly impressive. It was moving. It was emotionally moving to see how he was pushed physically and all that. But having never done one myself, I had no reference point for what that was going to be like. I knew that I had to prepare technically. So I did a lot of drilling. You have to demonstrate 50 techniques on both sides. So it's like 100 techniques that you have to demonstrate, positional escapes and chokes and arm locks and leg locks. And, it's a pretty extensive curriculum from white to blue in that lineage. And so I was prepared technically, but I just remember gassing out instantly because, I was way too intense. I wanted to perform well. Back to that continuum between relaxation and tension. I was completely tense. And the only thing I remember is after that first roll, I was done. I was so gassed out. And, it was just ugly after that.
Would you do it again?
Well, I did a purple belt demonstration and then I did a black belt demonstration. And I'm coming up on my first degree in a few months. And I told Roy, I said, listen, if you want me to do something, I'll do something. You're going to let me know in advance because I'm going to need to prepare and get in shape to do it. But I guess we'll see. He hasn't told me.
Well, I guess what I meant, would you do the same blue belt test again? Going back in time.
Could I do it?
Yeah. Would you? Yeah. Was the experience positive as you walked away from it?
Yes.
Was it worth?
Yes.
Was it worth the
Yes.
effort?
You know, there is something very powerful. Again, it's that tribal rite of passage where you show up on this day and it's about you. You are the star of the show. It's about you getting to the next level. It's about you representing yourself in front of your teammates, in front of your family who's watching, and everybody. And to then perform and be awarded a belt, I think it just makes that experience very, very special. And I would do it again, of course.
Well, I wanted to bring up the black belt test because I watched that. And it's out there. Everybody can watch it. No Mercy for Old Men, I believe. And 6 months preparation for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I knew it was going to be hard physically. You know, I'm older. I'm in my 50s.
Yeah.
I think I was 55 when I got my black belt. And so I knew that I had to really prepare physically. So I took 6-7 months and I was doing hill sprints. I was doing 2 training sessions a day. I would go train Jiu Jitsu every day. And then I would do some, whether it was strength work, conditioning, road work, whatever it was, I was doing two a day for 6 months, which is too much. I ended up tearing my shoulder about a month or maybe 6-7 weeks before my black belt test. I tore my labrum in 2 places in my shoulder. I was training with a wrestler from the University of Wyoming, and we were just working some stuff, and he did a fireman's carry on me, and it just torqued my shoulder, and he tore it. So yeah, I got injured, and I was just completely overtrained, but it's the only reason I survived.
Go ahead.
Well, people need to see this, and I think because there's a kata portion, right, where you're doing a demo, and then there's the rolling, and you're not just rolling a couple rounds. If I remember correctly, it's rapid fire, one person after another, after another, after another, and saying it's about you, which obviously it is, but you're in your academy at the time, right? Third Way.
No, I did it down here in California.
Oh, you did it down there. Okay.
Yeah, this one I came down here.
And
to
so
do it.
You have friends, you have family. The mental pressure of not only the test itself or the demonstration itself, but having all those other people around you, even though you had gone through it before, was the black belt, because people think you're a black belt, you know it all, you got it down, it's no problem. Was it more intense, the pressure more intense, or were you able to let go a little bit and say, I've been here before, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to get through this?
I think for this one, there was more pressure for sure. And it was a packed room. There was probably 60 people in the room. And so, yeah, there's pressure for sure. And you're right. It takes a lot of preparation. I demonstrated. So from purple belt on these belt demonstrations, you're required to put 10 multi-technique combinations together. And so a multi-technique combination can be from guard, you take an arm bar, maybe you do a flower sweep off of the arm bar, and then you finish with maybe an arm bar from mount. So there's 3 techniques in a combination. But as you progress to a darker belt, you're expected to make the combinations a little bit deeper. And there had been so many great demonstrations on Roy's channel, incredible, demos that I thought, well, how can I compete? Because I can't compete physically with some of these guys. I'm not as explosive as Byron Higginbotham, one of his guys. I'm not as, you always compare yourself to the guys that did it before. And I thought, well, what I can compete on is depth of knowledge. So my goal was to do 10 techniques per combination times 10. So there's 100 techniques right there. Plus, I was required to show like 35 or 40 individual techniques, and I threw a finish on every single technique. So it ended up being something like 160, 170 techniques total, if you actually count how many techniques I did. it was 100 and some, which takes time to put together. You can't just crap that out in one day. You actually have to give it a lot of thought. How do I get from here to there to there? Okay, is there another technique I can get to? And it becomes a, real creative expression. Of course, the first 7 combinations came relatively easy for me. The last 3 were just painful. You're just saying, oh gosh, what do I do? What do I do? Where do I go from here? But I met my goal, and I took a few months to practice.
What's going through your mind? You hit the technique number 7 or number 8, or you're sequencing them. You are at 0.7 or 8, and obviously there's physical component. Your mind is perhaps start drifting away at this point. What's going through your mind? Let me in.
No, I had it pretty well rehearsed. I didn't execute it perfectly. I go back and look, and there are a few mistakes here and there, but I had drilled it enough, and I would visualize it a lot. Every morning I'd wake up and I would run the whole demo in my head. And then at night before I went to bed, I would run it a couple times in my head. So I feel that I was pretty prepared. Of course, when the adrenaline hits and everybody's watching, and maybe that's where, going back to being a musician, you had asked about being introverted and getting up on stage. Mm-hmm. Maybe that training really helped me, because I used to have a little bit of stage fright in the early days, but I did it so much. I've, played hundreds and hundreds of shows, maybe thousands, that eventually you get very comfortable in that environment. So I think that experience helped me be a little bit calm and, keep my mind in it.
If you don't mind, let me ask you a direct question. Why in the world? Why in the world you did this? So many people out there, one listening, two, thousands watched it on YouTube, and they are scratching their head, and it's like, why put 7 months preparation into this? You already know this stuff. There's nothing to prove. Even if you didn't get that belt at that point, who cares? You have the knowledge. Why?
What drives anybody to reach the goal, to reach the objective? And, I wanted the black belt. That's what I was working for. I spent years and years and years working toward it. And so I knew it was a goal that I wanted to achieve, not for the belt itself, for the knowledge that represents, and really for the acknowledgement to me that I did it. I put in the work and I did it. It's kind of an acknowledgement of all of that struggle. But, being in this lineage with Roy Dean, a lot of people have come before me and have done those demos, and it's just the rite of passage. I knew it was what I had to do. There was never any question about saying, no, I'm not going to do this. But I knew I had to really embrace this process and do it right if I was going to survive.
Has it ever crossed your mind that this is not the right way? This is just out of your reach?
No. No. It gets harder as you get older, no doubt about it. It gets harder as you get older, and you're working with less. Your max heart rate is lower. You don't have the physical tools that you do at 25 or at 30. You don't have those physical tools. So you're working with a little bit less, but there's always a way to get there. There are always technical solutions. And I'm pretty competitive. I'm competitive with myself mostly. So in my mind, I don't think there was any question that this was what I wanted to achieve.
So if you obviously you work with many people at this point of time, there's a factor of success in your professional life and in jiu-jitsu and everything that you do, and you talk to many people, and there's many of them who find themselves in a similar situations as you were in the past, and that point of struggle is very present during jiu-jitsu practice or jiu-jitsu journey. What do you tell them? What do you say to somebody? How do you convince them that you can do it? That there is a solution to everything. It's just a matter of puzzling this together, putting this together. How do you present this to a student?
Yeah, I've had many students come to me, as I assume you have as well, guys that are on the verge of quitting. Man, I don't feel like I'm ever going to be good at this, or they're having those struggles. They don't know if they can continue. So you have to give them a pep talk. A lot of it is just letting go of expectations. we feel bad about our performance because we expected our performance to be better. Well, if you eliminate the expectation of results, I mean, you can expect that you're going to try, you can expect that you're going to have a good attitude. Those things are valid, but you can't really have an expectation of result. I'm going to go in tonight, I'm going to tap everybody. No, you can't have that expectation. So some of it is recalibrating yourself, finding reasons to train that don't have anything to do with your performance and more to do with you're just there with your friends having fun and so on. But yeah, it can be difficult to get people to stick with it, or to want to continue advancing, because it's very difficult.
So does that mean that performance or the end result is not as important as the work that we put into it?
The process. I'm a huge fan of the process. You have to learn to love the process, not the result. Because if you set a goal that's out there, but every day is a grind to get there, and you're struggling because you're not having fun, well, you're not going to make it to the goal. Whereas if you love if you find reasons to be joyful and have, positive feelings about those things that you're doing, then you're just immersed in this process, and the result becomes secondary to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's amazing how we talk to so many different people on the show, and literally everybody says the same thing, just different words, different perspectives, but it's all same thing. Embrace the grind.
Embrace the grind.
Embrace the grind.
This is kind of an abstract, but without Roy, do you think you would have gotten there? Would you have not finished, but would you have gotten your black belt?
That's an interesting question. I've told this story before a few times, so I'm repeating myself, but I believe it's important. Is that so? In Japan, the sensei obviously is the instructor. The senpai are the senior students that help transmit the knowledge. And so you want that triangle of skill. You need your sensei, you need the senior students, the senpai, and then everybody else. Well, a whole bunch of us became senpai at Roy's Academy as white belts because we were the first ones. And this group emerged, about 10 or 12 of us, TJ and Neil and James and Donald and Jimmy and me and probably a few others I'm forgetting. What's interesting is we all became senpai, even though we're white belts, and none of us quit. We all went on to become black belts. And so I wonder whether there is something extra psychologically, emotionally, some extra fuel that you get when you have that responsibility placed upon you, that you're a senior student. Oh, I'm expected. There's this expectation that I need to hold myself at a higher standard in order to, be part of this thing.
It's like almost.
So for me, there was never any question.
Yeah, you're
about
giving
that. But I wonder whether it was that. Had I just been, one of 200 students, a faceless student at a big academy where no one's paying attention to me, would I have had that same determination to keep going? And maybe not. And I became very close with Roy early on. He and I became best friends, and he and I are still great friends. We talk every day. And, maybe that connection as well kept me very interested in doing this.
Yeah, I think the responsibility put on people we always talk about quitting. It comes up all the time. And, for myself, if I quit, I'm not just quitting jiu-jitsu. I'm quitting a job.
You're quitting your tribe. You're letting your tribe down.
I'm disappointing family. I'm disappointing children. So it's like, it's a motivator, at times when maybe things aren't going your way, or you have those feelings or thoughts of this, I'm not getting better. This sucks. When you're not enjoying the process as much and you're looking for those end results. And I think that's a great thing I like that triangle that you're talking about. And making others responsible for people that are newer, not lesser, I don't want to approach it that way, but just newer. So you've got to carry them with you.
So
they're showing the way.
So what's more important? Are these assistants or the instructor? Are these the guys, the tribe? Is the senior guys, or is the instructor? It seems to me like they have different purpose.
They have different roles. I mean, that's an interesting question to me because, we live in an age of open source jiu-jitsu. You can go to YouTube, you can go anywhere, and there's You can live in the middle of nowhere and learn jiu-jitsu now because the resources are there. And I tend to think that it's better if you can either have a good coach and terrible training partners, or you can have incredible training partners and no coach. What would be the better situation? I think probably having incredible training partners would be ultimately more important than a coach these days, even though maybe that sounds a little sacrilegious to say that. Ideally, you would have both. You would have an instructor that can really lead the way, set the
tone,
lead by example, and so on. But I think it's underappreciated how important it is to have really good training partners.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this conversation comes up with so many different things. We keep bringing it up, but it just does come up where, even though jiu-jitsu might appear as individual activity, individual sport, we do need our training partners in order for us to get better. They are the ones who challenge us. They are the ones who will create obstacles, and without them, it would be nearly impossible to really make any type of progression whatsoever.
Well, you can learn your moves on your training dummy, but if there's no resistance, there's no partners, there's no pushing you, challenging you. What good is it, really?
It's not even that. It's not even that. I'm not even looking at the physical component. I'm looking at the way how we think, the mental stimulation. Different people will make different decisions, and based on that, different obstacles are being created. And as a result of it, I just learned by rolling with 5 different guys. I just learned 5 different responses to maybe similar situation, right? So it's all this continuous troubleshooting that people pose, and we have to overcome these challenges that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
And
that's what makes jiu-jitsu effective is the fact that we're having to deal with resistance, people who aren't going with the game plan. And, you can learn to execute a technique perfectly, but when there's resistance, everything changes.
Yeah. You've been in music for quite a bit. You have some experience in video. Do you find any similarities between the entertainment area and jiu-jitsu?
I don't know if there are similarities, but my background, so I have a background in audio, in music and audio production. And I've tried to bring kind of that experience to my channel and maybe have a little bit nicer aesthetic, or try to have, a certain look and feel to it. I think that's been the influence for me as far as that goes. But I don't know if there's a direct, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure how I would answer that.
The one I always think of when it comes to music, I dabbled a little bit, is that you have to learn your scales, you have to learn the fundamentals, and you have to do that in jiu-jitsu as well. Yeah. And then the more solid I suppose becomes, right?
Yeah, from that perspective, actually, maybe I misunderstood where you're going with that, because you're absolutely right. So in music, at least Western music of the West, I should say, classical, jazz, hip hop, rock, blues, there are only 12 notes. You look at a piano with 88 keys, there's only 12 notes, and they repeat in different octaves. Mm-hmm. All of the music that we listen to is made with 12 notes, which is pretty interesting. It's those combinations, how you combine them creates the tonality of the chords, and the rhythm you choose and all that creates the style of music. Well, in jiu-jitsu, there are really only so many ways to manipulate joints, but yet we have hundreds and hundreds of techniques that we use to manipulate those joints in the ways that they can be manipulated. So in that sense, it's like music, where you're learning to manipulate a joint, but the way that you do it is an expression of you creatively and an expression of what you like to do and so on.
I like that. I never thought about it. And I know nothing about music, but
we tease him, though. He's got a guitar and a piano in his living room, and he doesn't play either one of them. They just sit there.
My wife plays the piano, and the guitar is a big ambition that I had for 2 decades, and just I'll get there one day.
You got to get there. Do it.
I'll get there one day. But I never thought about it that way, that direct correlation
It's how you play. It's how you play, right?
Yeah.
It's how you get from one to the other.
Yeah.
Because the end result is always the same.
Yeah. That's interesting.
That's kind of how I look at it.
In the beginning, you mentioned that you don't like the spotlight, yet you've been on the stage hundreds, if not thousands, of times. How have you overcome that point of friction in life? I mean, being an instructor isn't a spotlight. You can't ignore that. You can't teach from another room until the holograms come. I said one day we're gonna have a hologram and like it's gonna teach itself. But until then, how do you connect those two?
It's an interesting thing in that my nature is more introverted, but yet I always enjoyed being on stage. I enjoyed kind of those things, and I love to teach, and I'm completely comfortable in a room full of people. So it isn't really that. There's an aspect of it that I enjoyed, but it took me a while to get real comfortable doing that. And I think that comfort came from two things. One is my preparation, being really prepared so that in that moment you can execute. Because if you're on stage playing guitar, a little bit of adrenaline hits, you start losing your fine motor skills, and it's real easy to not be able to perform to your capabilities. So I found that for me, the answer to having stage fright, or even as an instructor or anything else, it's number one is you have to know your material. You have to be 100% prepared. You have to be able to do this stuff in your sleep, right? And then, and then once you've done that enough, you've had enough experiences on stage or in front of people, then you start developing that confidence. You start having that positive reinforcement that, okay, it's fine. It's going to be okay. I did great. I did okay. It was fine. And then eventually you don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah. You know why I asked that question, right?
No.
Oh, of course. Yeah, you do. You're messing with me. Yeah. Listen, I have a fear of public speaking. Like you can't get me on a stage. There's no way. And yet I can be in front of a room of 70 people and you will never, people, anytime I bring that up, everybody tells me, it's like, what? There's no way. And it's such a different dynamic. That's the main reason why I asked. Yeah.
Public speaking is one of the greatest fears that humans have. It's very interesting. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I understand it. You stand in front of another tribe and they might eat you. So, but yeah, it's interesting. And maybe that goes to what I just said. You are comfortable in a jiu-jitsu context because you're an expert at this stuff. Yeah. You're an expert. You could teach in your sleep.
But it's not only
that. So there's a comfort there, whereas maybe walking on stage, it's an unfamiliar environment. There's no mats. It's a little different.
Yeah. I think it's the preparation too. The classes are structured, and there's a preparation that goes not only into knowing the technique, right? You have to obviously know that and be prepared, and be able to answer questions about it that may arise in class. But it's that at the 4-minute mark of class, we're doing this. At the 12-minute mark of class, we're doing that. And that carries through the rest of the class. That preparation, I think, is something that's not seen by the students. They don't get it. They're not going to sit back and look and be like, oh, every class at 18 minutes in, we're on to the second technique. And I think that preparation, along with the preparation of obviously technique and knowledge of jiu-jitsu, is what makes the difference, I think, for somebody who, like you said, if they had to walk out on a stage in front of a different tribe, they might fall apart. But they can walk into this environment and hit that 12-minute mark every time.
Well, this would explain why, having fear of specific thing is very likely because we trying to avoid the failure. We trying to avoid, not succeeding. And by having that structure, preparation, whatever, however you want to present this, but being ready for the unknown or minimizing the unknown puts us in a point of success. Right? It's just similar to what you were talking about, the test, drilling and visualizing and really being in tune with the situation, and removing the unknown factors really puts us in a point of comfort. And then we can just simply streamline this whole process and execute it to the best performance that we can possibly deliver at that time.
How do you,
well said.
On your website, there's a little portion there that talks about failures. How do you deal with failure?
Failure is always hard. I mean, failure is always hard. It can be emotionally hard, and so on. But I think we have to separate our worth, our self-worth as humans, with the failure itself. And so the reason people struggle with failure is because it becomes a reflection on them personally. And so for me, it's kind of disconnecting that. So it's not really a reflection on me per se. It's simply something that happened. And then I always say failure is feedback, being able to learn from the failure, because if you can't learn from the failure, if you're going to just be in denial or try to, well, that wasn't my fault or whatever, then you're not evolving as a person. So you have to be willing to accept it, learn from it, grow from it, and realize that failure is one of the ways that we improve. If you've never failed in life, you're probably not doing hard things.
You're not trying. Yeah, absolutely. Do you recall one of the life lessons that, had a big anchor for you personally, either personal or on the mat?
In terms of failure?
Yeah. They're one of those lessons, one of the failure points where you had to sit down
one of the
and
big
reflect on
points of failure. I used to own a tech company. I owned a software company, and ultimately we shut it down. And it was a very successful company for a long time. And toward the end, we got into trouble, and some things happened, and I made some bad decisions. I made some great decisions, but I made some bad decisions at critical points, and ultimately it cost me my business. So yeah, I've seen it from that perspective. I failed there. I have a marriage that failed. I mean, I've failed a lot, honestly. I've failed in many things. And, it's just the willingness to pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and not dwell on it. What can I learn from this? How can I be better? And you just keep going.
I love how open you are about the obstacles, the failures, the points of adjustment, and the lessons learned, if you will, and continue growing and evolving in life and becoming who we are today. I mean, I'm a strong believer of everything behind us put us in a point where we are today. Without that, we wouldn't be where we would be somewhere else, but not here. So successes, failures, I do appreciate them. We've been at this for a while at this point. We are a point of the show where we have a very important question for you. A guest who was sitting in your seat, in the previous episode has asked a question, which always is interesting. But he didn't know that it's going to be you who's going to be answering that question. And Gary's going to take a lead on this.
Yeah, so this comes from the last guest, Paul Schreiner. And he asked, what endeavor or skill are you looking for in the future? What's your next chapter?
That's an interesting question. I mean, ultimately, I think my goal is to be in business again at some point. I mean, I'm in business now sort of for myself, and, I teach and I do other things, but the last real business I owned was my software company. And I think in the future, I would love to do something, maybe not in that realm, not in tech, maybe something else. But I think there's a business out there that I haven't explored yet that might be real interesting. So I think that's something that's left for me to do.
No Jiu Jitsu Academy for you?
Probably not. I mean, I'm getting old, and when you're on the mat every single day, it can be a grind. It can be hard.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Listen, before we wrap this up, I mean, an amazing amount of information. I love the stories. I do appreciate all the time that you spend with us. But if anybody wants to connect with you, anybody wants to reach out to you, are you accessible on social media, websites, anywhere where, or share some of the information with us?
Yeah, probably the simplest way is to go to my website, rickellis.com, just my name.com. You can reach me at rick@rickellis.com. If you want to email me, you can go to the Art of Skill channel on YouTube. That's where I produce media. I'm on Instagram, real Rick Ellis, or no, Rick Ellis Official, I think, on Instagram. And On Facebook, I think I'm the real Rick Ellis, or I just, you can find me, Google me. I'm around.
You are
I'm
not
super
difficult to find.
Yeah.
You are not
I'm not-
difficult to find.
Tragically, I'm not difficult to find.
Is that a good or bad thing? Do you like, I mean, you talked about not being in a spotlight, but do you enjoy the fact that, you are considered one of the pioneers, you are considered some of the guys who've been around for a while, and you've done quite a bit with the message that you're trying to present to the students around the world at this point. Do you enjoy that?
I wouldn't say enjoy. That's probably too strong because, again, I'm a little introverted, but I accept that it comes with the territory. You just have to be a public person these days if you're going to be doing the kind of stuff that we do. And it's just mandatory, and you either embrace it or it drives you nuts. So I've just embraced it. Someday I hope to unplug from everything. And I think I'll enjoy that day where I delete everything I've ever done, but that's going to be a while.
Do you think that's even possible to unplug completely today?
It would be pretty hard. It would be real hard. But I mean, if you had a dumb phone, some kind of communication device, I think it's possible. Sure.
Well, don't unplug yet. I for selfish reason, I love what you do. So don't unplug yet.
No plans anytime soon.
Rick, thank you for being here. Thank you for spending the last 60 minutes with us and sharing your story, sharing your journey, sharing your wisdom. We do appreciate everything that you do for Jiu-Jitsu community, and I truly hope that we'll see much, much more as time goes on. Gary?
Yeah, thanks for everything. Thanks for me personally having being an inspiration. When COVID hit, I was like, what are we doing? I had just left a different career, and the academy gets shut down. What's happening? But to see what you were putting out there, it just kind of pushed everybody. We were passing the video around, sharing the link, and I think it was very uplifting at a point in time where people were very unsure of what was going to happen next. So just on a personal note, I wanted to say thank you for that, and then thank you for sharing with us today.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Gary, and thank you, Thomas. I enjoyed coming on today, and look forward to hearing more episodes from you guys. You guys do a really good job here for the community, and it's a great show.
Well,
thank you so much.
We do appreciate the kind words. All right, let's wrap this up for today.
All right, thank you so much. Peace.
Later.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.